Funding for Amish cooking from Quilt Country with Marcia Adams was provided by
Sauter Woodworking, America's furniture craftsman.
And by Marilat Industries, America's cabinet maker, committed to quality and a variety of kitchen and bath cabinetry styles.
Hi there, and welcome to Amish Cooking from Quilt Country. The menu today is what could be called a spring menu. We're going to make succulent leg of lamb stuffed with mint and prunes, and then a rhubarb dessert, a most captivating dessert, actually. And then, what do you think of asparagus pie? It's really a brilliant way to present that vegetable. And then we'll finish by preparing poppy seed dressing, which we'll toss with mixed spring greens. Lamb is a meat that's not normally associated with perhaps Christmas dinner, but it's certainly associated with Easter dinner. But today, with meat shipped in from different climates all over the world, you know, we can have it the year around. Incidentally, much of the lamb that we buy today is from New Zealand. We do begin, however, by making this wonderful mint and prune stuffing. In a bowl, combine 2 cups of very dried small bread cubes with a ½ cup of very finely minced celery. And then we're going to add a whole melange of seasonings: 2 tablespoons of minced onion, a tablespoon of green bell pepper, a tablespoon of minced parsley, and this is crumbled up bay leaf right here, and a tablespoon of fresh marjoram, or you could use 1/4 teaspoon of dried, and some pepper, and then to finish it off, 2 tablespoons of very finely chopped fresh mint, and combine that all. At this point, we can use our paws and just get in there and toss it all up. Speaking of mint, reminds me that the Amish raise a lot of mint on their farms for chewing gum manufacturers, if you can believe. So when you have a piece of peppermint or spearmint gum, there's a very good chance that the mint came from an Amish farm in Indiana. Now, the liquids in this particular mixture are really pleasant, and we're going to add 3 tablespoons of melted butter, or you could use margarine, and a tablespoon or 2 of lemon juice, because that's going to add piquancy to this. And 6 prunes. These are the moist pitted kind, you see, that have been very finely chopped. Prunes marry very well with distinctly flavored meats, such as this lamb, or wild fowl, such as pheasant. Mix this up again. It's, you see, a dry, crumbly dressing, but it's going to absorb the juices of the lamb. Lamb meat is always less than a year old, and if it's older than that, it happens to be mutton. And it's not nearly as popular here in America as it is in England, where it is one of their favorite dishes. Mutton has a much stronger flavor. Now, this is a 5-pound boned leg of lamb, and have your butcher do that. Order it 3 or 4 days in advance, because it's kind of hard work. It's been slightly butterflied, and it's a very irregular piece of meat, but when I finish up, it's going to have some form to it, and I'll talk to you about that. Now, pat as much of this dressing on as you can. I'm trying to think of the best way to flip this over. I think we'll start at this side. That would be the way that we can get it together the best. And just pile on as much as you think it will take. And then we're going to lace it up much the way we do a Thanksgiving turkey. Now flip this over like that. See, the stuffing's going to come out, but I'm sure going to fix that pronto. There we are. Actually, lacing this up is very much like you would lace your sneakers or a pair of shoes. Most of the lamb that we buy in supermarkets is about 5 months old and has been fed on a milk formula instead of a grain and grass one. If it had been fed on grain and grass, it would have a darker color and a stronger flavor, but it still wouldn't be like mutton. Oh, this mint smells so good. You know, back in the 1800s, my great-grandfather, who was a banker, was also a mint farmer and had a mint distillery. Now, mind you, I said mint distillery, not the other kind. And mint extract was considered so valuable because it was used in medicines that he stored his processed mint extract actually in the bank vaults, as did the other farmers. Isn't that interesting? But that's how important agriculture was to those early farmers. Now we're ready for the lacing. And whoops, pull this one out. These little skewers, incidentally, come in handy when you're testing cakes. You could put one in the center of cake, and if it comes out with a little bit of batter on it, you know the cake's not done. Now see, I have a very long piece of kitchen cord here, and I buy the kitchen cord at my hardware, and it's available also at food specialty shops. See, do I have enough? Yes, I do. There. Lamb is a very important meal, or rather I should say Easter is an important meal for the Amish. And in many communities, they would serve this lamb, or they might serve ham. And it would be a preferred dish. Certainly lamb would be for a very special occasion. Easter is an important religious holiday for the Amish because this day symbolically signifies the resurrection of new life, which includes the land. And of course, to the Amish, the land is important. They consider themselves stewards of the soil. So you could imagine that they do attach a lot of importance to Easter. See, this is coming together as a crisscross. And then tie it very firmly. You can do it in a bow if you want to. And snip. Your oven should be preheated to 325 degrees. And by all means, use a meat thermometer because that's the only way you can tell whether or not the interior is finished. And I'm going to use this chain. This reminds me of tire chains, actually, but it's just great for getting your roast in and out of the oven. And the pan when you're ready to drain off the pan juices, and throw in a couple of ribs of celery and a carrot and a quartered onion, but leave the skin on because that's good for color and for flavor. For a 5-pound boned leg of lamb like this, count on baking it at 20 minutes per pound, and it ought to be at 145 degrees when you take the meat thermometer out of the oven. If you want it at well, do it at 160 degrees. For medium, put it in for about an hour and a half. Now, this leg of lamb, stuffed with its lively mixture of crumbs and prunes and mint, is really a scrumptious entree. And just look at that. We have it garnished with lettuce and some prunes. The next recipe we do is made with rhubarb. You saw me carry that in, so you knew I was going to do something great with it, didn't you? Did you know that rhubarb is not actually a fruit? It's the stalk of a plant that's related to buckwheat. Only the stalks are edible, and these very gorgeous leaves, which farm children use as umbrellas when they play Let's Pretend, you know, they're poisonous to eat because they contain oxalic acid. Now, when we were working with these old recipes from the Amish and the Mennonites, many of them dated back to the 19th century, but we've updated all of them for today's kitchen and electric appliances. So here in the food processor bowl, I have 2 cups of flour, and to that we're going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and then 2½ tablespoons of cold butter. The cold part's important. Now, pulse that enough times that you're going to have coarse crumbs. The original old recipe said, chop it up until it looks like corn niblets. That was the fun of working with these old recipes. You had lots of funny expressions to work with. Now to that, add a 1/2 cup to 3/4 cup of cold milk, and pulse it until it just makes a stiff dough, because you're going to roll this up like a jelly roll. Do not overwork any sort of biscuit dough because it will be quite tough if you do, but still you want this firm enough to roll out. I am so pleased to come over here and find out that I have one already rolled out for me. We'll tidy up here. As I've mentioned before, I'm sort of obsessive compulsive about keeping things tidy on the set, which drives everybody crazy. There. Now, here we have that biscuit dough already rolled out to a 12 by 10 inch rectangle. Hallelujah, I was right. There it is. Spread this rectangle with 2 tablespoons of softened butter or margarine. Don't use the whipped margarine because it has too much water in it and you'll have a problem with that baking up properly. Do it clear to the edges because you want everybody to have the same amount of good filling. Then over the top, sprinkle 2 cups of very finely chopped, and you see that is a finely chopped rhubarb. Now you can use frozen rhubarb on this, but if you do, make sure that it's absolutely frozen solid, because if it's beginning to thaw a bit, what will happen is the thawing juices will go right through this biscuit dough and you won't be able to get it rolled up and you'll be in a jolly mess. Then over the top, sprinkle a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. My mouth's watering already. And then liberally put cinnamon on. Now you could use nutmeg, and you could add a touch of allspice if you like, or you could add a touch of mace. And then, beginning at the long side, just like you would do a jelly roll, roll this up. It's going to be a lot coarser, of course, as you well know. There we are. Ooh, didn't that come together beautifully? Then cut this in 12 1-inch slices. You know, rhubarb is a very permanent plant, and once established, it lives for years, rather like peonies. And another point in its favor, that it's the earliest fruit crop of all. Now, over the top, then, we're going to pour this delicate pink sauce that makes it very pretty and makes it also a little bit sweet. In a saucepan, combine 1.5 cups of granulated sugar and a tablespoon of flour and some cinnamon, perhaps 1/4 teaspoon, and a speck of salt. Then you want 1.5 cups of hot water. And you're going to simmer this together, and you're going to have a nice thickened sauce to pour over. And then add a splash of vanilla and a little bit of red food coloring. And that red food coloring, I think, is important. I'm going to have to use a whisk after the show is over to get that one straightened up. And then 1/3 cup of butter. Yummy, right? It has to cool after it's boiled together, and we have one here. I've rushed too much. I want this to be this beautiful symmetrical dessert. Pour the cold sauce over the rhubarb and bake this at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. This is truly a beguiling spring dessert, and rhubarb dumplings are a bit original, don't you think? I don't know anyone who hasn't been charmed by this dessert. To further enhance our spring menu, let's make an asparagus pie. Some of you may not think that sounds too good, but this is one of those trust me recipes. First of all, you can do several things in advance. Do a baked pie shell, 9-inch, a deep one. Pre-bake it for about 6 minutes so it is a little bit firm but not golden brown. Then prepare 2 cups of chopped asparagus, and this can either be fresh and blanch it for 3 minutes, or it can be frozen and thawed on paper towels. And really, the frozen is as good nearly as the fresh. And then hard cook 4 eggs and grate 1/2 cup of cheese. Then you want to make a very basic white sauce. And the proportions, and I'll give them to you, and we've certainly done white sauce a lot on this show, is 1/3 cup of butter and 5 tablespoons of flour and 2 cups of milk, and then just make your basic white sauce. But we've added some really nice spices to this to sort of bring up a piquant flavor, and I'll show you what they were. They were 1/2 teaspoon of curry powder, and that's what gives this a creamy look, and 1/2 teaspoon of celery salt, and a bit of pepper. And then to further give a touch of elegance, we've added 2 teaspoons of lemon juice and simmered that together. You really could make this in advance. Now, to assemble this, you want to put alternate layers of asparagus and hard-cooked eggs in the pie shell. This is really, I would tell you, a very substantial dish. And you can make this white sauce in advance if you like, but don't put this together until you're just ready to bake it, or the crust will get soggy. we're going to put on about 2 hard-boiled eggs. Don't crumble these up, because when you cut into this pie, you want to see the layers of color. This is a substantial dish, as I mentioned, because you have got in it the eggs and the cheese. So you have 2 total proteins here. Now a few more eggs. Smooth this out. Asparagus has a reputation for being expensive, and it is. And one reason is because it's difficult to raise, and it's also difficult to harvest. So people are rather adept at taking a few spears and making it go a long way. And I recall that my own mother used to take a few spears of asparagus and cream it, and then she would serve that over toast, and that would be a lunch dish in spring. Now pour this nicely seasoned white sauce over the pie and smooth it out, clear to the edges like this, and then you can take either a spoon or a fork and sort of let this get down in there. But again, not breaking up the eggs, but you sort of want to see that the white sauce gets down in there to the bottom. Though it will do some of that on its own as it bakes. And sprinkle over this grated cheese. My mouth's watering. And then sprinkle the top with a little bit of paprika for extra color. Now, this part could be done for about an hour in advance to baking time and put in your refrigerator, but I wouldn't do it much longer than that. You want to bake this in a 350-degree oven for 45 minutes. Now, it is supposed to stand then for 10 minutes before you serve it, because that way the white sauce will cool down a bit. Isn't this gorgeous? This really is an extremely colorful pie. Consider not only using it as a side dish, but also as a light spring luncheon menu. Now, to round out the menu, let's have a green salad with poppy seed dressing. I would be the first to tell you that the Amish and Mennonites really like sweet salad dressings. The poppy seed dressing I'm going to make appears on every salad bar in local restaurants in the Indiana and Ohio area. And it's just wonderful on fruit salads too. But now when I speak of fruit salad, I'm talking about a bed of lettuce with fresh fruit on it, such as pineapple and watermelon and apples, and then you drizzle this lovely, lovely sauce on top. We begin by combining in a mixer bowl 1.5 cups of granulated sugar. And to that, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of ground mustard. Don't use an English brand, because that's entirely too hot. You want a good domestic brand. And then 2 teaspoons of salt and 2/3 cup of cider vinegar. Don't get fancy on me and use tarragon vinegar or wine vinegar. You want cider vinegar for this recipe to be successful. And then quickly blend this. Some cooks will permit this mixture to stand overnight in a glass container. I do not do that. You can skip that step, but the original recipe did call for it. Now for the oil, again, don't get fancy and use olive oil. Use a very light flavored vegetable oil. I prefer sunflower oil or safflower oil. Then this needs to beat for 5 minutes. What you really are doing is helping dissolve the sugar. And then after 5 minutes, you want to add 3 tablespoons of poppy seeds. Now, poppy seeds are quite an expensive commodity, and they do get rancid if you leave them on the shelf in your kitchen. So store them in your little freezer in the kitchen. And then you beat this another 5 minutes. Did I tell you that? Now, the Amish, to finish this up, would take their dishpan out to the garden and come in with a dishpan of exquisitely fresh greens, and it would include deer tongue lettuce and oak leaf lettuce and maybe even some ruby like this. I want to give you a little hint about tossing a salad. Always put your other ingredients, not the lettuce, on the bottom because they are heavier than lettuce. You should end up with the light lettuce on top. As a further touch to this, we're going to use some dill to flavor this salad. The traditional Amish cooks do not use many herbs in their cooking. However, there are recipes that call for parsley and dill and chives and garlic and sage, and those are really used in many dishes. However, because their local groceries now offer broader selections, they've become acquainted with and are using other herbs such as oregano, basil, and thyme. Now, I'm asked about how much dressing one should pour into salads, because sometimes you find too much. I think a good rule of thumb is to use 1 tablespoon of dressing per person, plus 1 for the bowl. So if you're going to serve 6 people, and I think this is what it would serve, you would want here 7 tablespoons, because we don't want to forget the bowl. This hardly looks like a dishpan, does it? Isn't this an exquisite piece? Now toss this lightly. And as I told you, here come the heavier ingredients from the bottom, and they're going to be right on top when we finish up where you want them for color. I like red onion a lot in salads. Something else I add to this salad, which is good, would be toasted sunflower seeds, and that would sort of pick up the flavor of the sunflower oil. Isn't that lovely? This sweet salad dressing is always a hit, and it keeps indefinitely in the refrigerator. The dill gives it an extra lilt. You have seen me use both mint and dill today. These are favorite herbs among all the Pennsylvania Dutch. And there's a lovely herb garden in Indiana that I want to share with you, where many examples of the herbs used in Amish recipes are grown. Oris Hippensteel walked with me through her garden. Our first stop was at a very spectacular mint bush.
Marcia, the mint is a wonderful plant, has many, many uses, and I want to show you one that is one of my favorites. This particular one has a pink bloom to it, but it's a great tea mint. This one is its first cousin. This is a variegated, and you'll notice that here we have the white leaves on it, and you'll notice also that my husband and I put it in a flue liner.
What a good idea.
Yes, so it wouldn't grow across the garden and up the flagpoles.
That's to contain the roots, is it not?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, this is mint too, is it not?
Yes, a very nice one. This is a woodland mint. Smell it, Marcia. It has a great fragrance to it.
It's very, very aromatic.
Yes.
And here we have an old favorite of mine.
This is dill. This is dill. And of course, this is used always in the dill pickles. And it can also be used with, my son makes a recipe that has the bacon in it and dill. And it's a cornbread. It's very, very good.
Sounds delicious.
Yes, very good. I love the leaves on it. And it can become invasive, though. Marcia, over here we have a beautiful thyme. This one is called a woolly thyme. Has a real neat fuzzy look to it. And this one right here is a beautiful one. This is called Annie Hall thyme. And it's
so pretty.
Yes, and as you know, the Amish use this in some of their cooking, and it's a very interesting thyme. And I look at the activity with all the bees in here.
It's just a carpet of purple.
Yes.
I believe they use thyme a lot in their bread dressings.
Yes.
And some of their meat dishes. It's very, very nice.
Well, I love to grow it. I think it's a beautiful plant.
Herbs are used in desserts as well as in vegetable and meat dishes. Look at the thumbrit cookies with herb jellies, lavender cookies, delicate and tender, and the stunning calendula cake. Isn't that an enchanting place? To me, herbs add an extra dimension of creativity to cookery. The same creative flair exhibited by the Amish women in their cookery is also seen in their quilts. And so it's very appropriate that I show you an old Amish quilt at the end of every show, for quilts are almost synonymous with the Amish. Before we take a look at the quilt, let's go over what we did today. A perfection of a roast, leg of lamb stuffed with mint and prune dressing, pink-tinged rhubarb dumplings. If you like rhubarb, or even if you don't like rhubarb, you're going to be enthusiastic about this dessert. Elegant asparagus pie, a surprising way to use that vegetable. And of course, delicious poppy seed dressing, a tasty way to accent mixed greens. I always use these white gloves whenever I handle these old quilts, because the natural oils in my hand would damage these old fibers. This quilt is a stunning 8-point star made by Sadie Mast, who was the wife of the Bishop of Huntingville District in Indiana. The star pattern is an exuberant design that immediately gets your attention, as you can see. And this is also a reversible quilt with a startling green back. Sadie Mast was not only a fine quilter, but she was also a fine gardener. The provenance of this quilt states, and I quote, "Sadie's garden was her pride and joy. When she died in 1986, she was very bent in posture from the endless hours she spent gardening." Isn't that a lovely epitaph? So, you see, memories of her garden and certainly her quilts do live on. So until next time, as a goot, eat good.
All recipes seen in this series are available in Marcia Adams' book, Cooking from Quilt Country. This hardcover contains nearly 200 Amish and Mennonite recipes with color photographs and descriptions of the food and folkways of America's heartland. The cost of the book is $24.95 plus handling. Please have your credit card ready when you call 1-800-325-2667. Series 2 of Amish Cooking from Quilt Country is available on home video for $59.95 plus shipping. All 13 programs in this second series are compiled on 3 VHS cassettes. Call 1-800-325-2667 for credit card orders.